A culture based upon constructive prestige is one where excellence is admired, praised, and striven for. Now, this is the sort of culture that tends to arise in all male spaces, where men congregate around either a common goal or a common passion. Now, what is gynocentric prestige and how does it differ from this? When you add women into a public space, any mutual encouragement towards excellence eventually becomes replaced among the men of the group by a subtle negativity towards one another's efforts. The reason that men strove to keep women out of public spaces like the office and government in the past is derived from, I think, the recognition of the difference in these two cultures. Why is this important? Well, let's take a look at the micro level and try and map out the psychology of the male mind itself, more specifically how I theorize it processes these different forms of prestige. I think men naturally are drawn to pursue excellence for its own sake. Pursuit of excellence is highly rational in the hunter-gatherer sense of the word. And that's why I think it makes us feel so good to achieve mastery, to channel our dominance drive towards the achievement of excellence. Patriarchies in the past existed as much as anything because men recognized, I think, that clear-headed and sometimes ruthless decision-making was necessary for the promulgation of the human race in a time of natural danger and resource scarcity. However, once survival of the tribe is secured, on both the micro and macro level, men become inundated, I think, by the gynocentric prestige-seeking aspect of the male psyche. Why do men take on jobs that are high-paying, but ultimately destroy them with stress and far more pressure than even the most anti-fragile man could possibly enjoy? Well, it's for the approval and the faux admiration of the female specter lurking at the periphery of his own consciousness. He is showing off towards the female gaze haunting his own mind, and he revels in the energy that her approval continually provides him through a form of narcissistic ego validation. A man doesn't need to open his mouth to other people about his accomplishments, his gynocentric prestige-based accomplishments, how much money he's made in order to impress women, how much status he's had in order to impress women. He knows his actions will speak for themselves, but somehow the man's many victories perpetually turn to ashes. And most men are puzzled by this, but I'll tell you why it is. The man is driven by his own sense of insecurity. He is driven by his own sense of inadequacy and the mindset of too much is never enough. Nothing is ever enough. Think of a 35-year-old brooding lawyer in New York, right? Let's use a tangible example. Now, this guy's got all the wealth, the prestige that anyone could want. He's had victory after victory in his life. He's got a nice high-rise in New York City. Beautiful fiancée sleeping softly on his bed. It's 4 a.m. He's staring out over the veranda at the cool morning air, wondering why the fuck he's so goddamn miserable on the inside. I'll tell you why he's miserable. He's miserable because he's taken the bait of his female specter in his own consciousness. He's fallen into the psychological trap of striving to acquire gynocentric prestige, and he's succeeded. He's very gynocentrically prestigious, but not only is he miserable, gentlemen, he has to keep his misery a secret, because if anyone finds out he's actually miserable, something's wrong with the guy, right? They'd hate him. Because by society standards, read gynocentric prestige standards, he's got everything a man could ever possibly want. But he feels ashamed because the problem lies within him, he feels. And that's partially true. He's miserable because this is what happens when a man chases the impossibility of his own godhood in the archetypal sense. I'm not talking about he's literally chasing godhood. It is an unfulfillable mission. And we as men, we love missions. But think about it, you always read these articles like, oh, women find the brooding man attractive, the brooding proud man the most attractive. Obviously that's not true in public, but yeah, if a woman finds a man who has a lot of social skills in the public sphere, but seems unhappy for inscrutable reasons in the private sphere, why does she find him attractive? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because the brooding man is brooding because in one way or another he's succumbed to the siren call of the female specter in the periphery of his own consciousness. And he has chosen to strive to acquire gynocentric prestige and sacrifice himself on the altar of the Sisyphusian chasing of his own godhood. And he's doing it because he wants to acquire enough resources, enough status to attract women. It's all for women. It's not for himself. That's why. Women recognize it. The perfect workhorse, right? The perfect provider is one who tortures himself to keep climbing the ladder. That's the unhealthy form of ambition that women love, and they love to reward it. He's subcommunicating that he wishes to become the ultimate gynocentric alpha. The man who has many resources, who has great status. She wants a slice of his emotionally wounded cake to manipulate him and ultimately secure his resources, his status. Infatuation's all that is love to a woman. That infatuation must perpetually be maintained. And otherwise she'll just leave for someone with better resources. One of the most compelling villains I ever encountered is from this video game I grew up on. It's called Baldur's Gate 2. The villain's name is John Irenicus. He was this powerful mage, this extremely powerful mage who fell in love with the queen of his people. He became jealous and possessive because he was too intelligent to believe the queen could love him in a sustainable way, unless he literally ascended to godhood. His pursuit of godhood was just to be lovable to the eyes of the woman that he loved. And it drove him to a life of ruination and misery. I think infatuation is a narcissistic projection on the man's part as well. I've said this many times. In a way, I think a man, he sees a version of himself reflected in the eyes of a woman that he's with that he actually likes for the first time maybe in his life. Because think about it, culturally at least, and I think it comes down to our biology as well. Men were conditioned to believe we have no worth except for what we can give to women. Or give to the tribe or whatever. We have no worth in and of ourselves. And that leads, I think, a lot of times to self-hatred for men. So when a man finally falls for an image of himself that isn't loathsome in the eyes, reflected in the eyes of the woman that he's infatuated with, it's just narcissistic projection. Yeah, he feels empowered by, I think a lot of men will know what I talk about when I say that there's this form of God worship, so to speak. It's a microcosm of God worship. It's not exactly the right terminology for it, but a woman will worship a man she believes in. And you can see it in her eyes. But in the end, he's also fallen for himself, the self he sees reflected in her eyes that has worth. He's reinvented himself as a man of worth. But he's not striving for excellence for its own sake now. He's striving to bolster the godhood found reflected in the eyes of the woman he's currently with, because he realized that to satisfy a woman's hypergamy and to keep her attracted, godhood is required. And so he'll push himself harder and harder, rolling the Sisyphusian boulder of his own unhappy efforts in prestige-laden areas up the mountain of gynocentric success. It'll never make him happy. And it'll never be enough for her. I said this in the Muse Effect. A woman, especially in the hyper-real society we inhabit in modernity, is geared towards desiring Christian Grey and believing she's entitled to it. She's just told this over and over. She deserves it. She's constantly being hit on if she's beautiful and young by other men. Her current man must, in order to keep her infatuation state, continually pass checks in order to remain desirable in her eyes. Over time, though, the pathogenesis of vulnerability becomes easier and easier to incept naturally, even in terms of a glance. No matter what he hypothetically tries, it'll never be enough. This is just a woman's innate biopsychology mixing with current culture. The infatuation fades away. And that infatuation, again, it's what we call love. Oftentimes you hear people saying, well, we have a traditional relationship and we're happy. We're happy. How much of that is just they care way too much about what society thinks and they just want to seem like they're happy? Or maybe they're living a long-distance relationship. I said this in the Muse Effect. You have this traditional relationship where the woman is like, wow, he's so dreamy. I look at he's above everybody else. Do they live together? Give it a year. Give it 2 years. Yeah, I've said it before. Technology has advanced us to an anesthetized place, an instant gratification place our biology has not had time to adjust to. I believe any relationship is one inherently gynocentric, as the man must continue to strive harder and harder to keep the same woman interested, as her natural infatuation inevitably erodes, and 2, futile. The infatuation will, in a scientifically proven way, fade, and the infatuation's the only thing powerful enough, in terms of a dopamine-laden neurochemical cocktail, to keep a woman interested in a man who has many options, a woman that has many options anyway. After everything fails, after the breakup, the face of this haunting female specter in a man's mind becomes the woman that left him. And it wounds him because of this, gentlemen, is the knowledge that no matter how hard he tried to keep her, he himself was insufficient to maintain her attraction, even though he tried his hardest. And that's what kills a man on the inside. That narcissistic high of his own gynocentric prestige-based relationship at the beginning, the worship reflected in a woman's eyes at the outset, created a drug addiction that will drive a man to self-hatred and hatred for those around him after everything falls to shit. And then he will either fall into a depression or he will redouble his efforts to climb the gynocentric prestige ladder, running always away from his own inadequacy. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think gynocentric prestige is the main reason for this deeply ingrained blue pill masochism. I know you know what I'm talking about. Men love to humble brag, subcommunicate about how much they can suffer without overtly complaining about it. It's a blue pill suffer pride. Because blue pill men innately sense they inhabit a gynocentric prestige culture. And they know that to succeed overtly too much paints a target on their back. So every man has to seem like he's miserable. He doesn't want to be the target that every other man gangs up on in a gynocentric prestige society. Think of 3 guys at a water cooler in the office. What's the general direction of their conversation? Oh, my ball and chain told me I can't come to the game on Saturday. She's always busting my balls. Yeah, well, I woke up at 3 in the morning, it's unrelated, but I'm sub-communicating my dominance in terms of me suffering slightly more than you. I haven't been sleeping much lately. And then the other guy goes, yeah, well, I woke up at 2:59 this morning. Blah, blah, blah. Men complain to diminish themselves in front of one another because they don't need to provoke one another right now. They got too much shit that they've heaped upon themselves in a gynocentric prestige environment. And all in all, it's mainly self-imposed, this stress they put on themselves. They work extra hours they don't need to work to bribe a wife that doesn't deserve them into not leaving them with more necklaces and baubles and additions on the house while she cheats on him with the milkman. But they do so in a passive-aggressive way meant to subcommunicate their own toughness. And that's the sickest part. That's quote-unquote manhood these days. Gentlemen, who can suffer the most in silence while sickly pawning it off as enduring the most and being the toughest? It's fucking pathetic. Who can sit there and suffer the most without complaining as their dreams are categorically smashed by gynocentric prestige? So of course I don't give a shit about being a quote-unquote real man these days, because it's all this gynocentric prestige-based humble bragging masochism. Fuck that. But like I've said in the past, what's the solution? Okay, gynocentric prestige sucks, okay? Pandering to women sucks, but we're still attracted to women. That'll never go away. A lot of people in my comments section, they say, you know what, ever since I found out the truth of women, I don't feel attracted to them anymore. Well, that's not been my experience. And the solution is constructive prestige. Chasing excellence for its own sake, and women will come to the man who chases excellence. Truly. And if the man can just adopt a zen-like detachment from her attraction and just enjoy her while she's around and let her go when she's gone, that's the best we can do. So I'm going to leave it on a positive note. I think when men realize that channeling their dominance drive towards constructive prestige instead of gynocentric prestige is the only thing that can make a man happy, men begin to conduct themselves in a way where they strive for excellence for its own sake. And these men become locuses around which other men rally. I've seen this at the office in different permutations. You'll have a gynocentric prestige-based office until enough men realize, it's about the love of the game. If you're lucky enough to be in an office like that, if enough men become locuses where they just put the blinders on and they say, you know what, I love the game, I'm not going to bite off more than I can chew, I'm going to approach everything with humility, and I'm just going to enjoy my life, enjoy my work. There's a sense of nobility in men as well, and it activates. They feel ashamed. They're like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have, been going for this gynocentric prestige. It's so fucking petty and futile. And if enough men wake up in a firm and start going for constructive prestige, chasing excellence, they lead by example. And a firm that gets overtaken by enough locuses of constructive prestige is a firm that becomes excellent itself. That's a good work culture. Okay, Coterie, if we're not chasing the external validation of women, ought we to chase the external validation of men? Is that what you mean by excellence culture? Is that what you mean by constructive prestige? Absolutely not. 100% no. Those things, that wouldn't make any sense. To chase excellence for its own sake is to let go, to push away even. External validation, it doesn't matter, gentlemen, what other people think about you. It just doesn't matter. In an existential sense, it fucking means nothing. Give your gift.